Jay Ratliff's back on the James Show. Jay Ratliff, it's good to talk to you because we've been having quite a few aviation incidences, some of them outright crashes, a lot of close calls. What is going on? Does this have anything to do with Doge cuts?
It is not. It is not. And, I'm all about perspective. And, I trade stocks, so when the market goes up or down and people are freaking out, I always look at the percentage of the movement because the percentage tells you exactly how bad a situation might happen to be. Now, when you're talking about accidents and reports of accidents, the same thing. I'll look at the information that the National Transportation Safety Board puts out with regards to, exactly what's going on as far as the number of accidents, near accidents we've had. And the latest NTSB dashboard, if you will, that talks about just accidents themselves, they show that January and February, we had 64 accidents in January, 55 in February. And when you look at those 2 months, it makes it the safest 2 months of travel that we've had to start a year in 20 years. So
So not only is there not a spike in issues, it's the safest it's been since 2000-ish.
When you look at the number of accidents, yes. Now, here's the difference. We've gone 16 years between major commercial aviation accidents, and that number combines general aviation and commercial aviation. But when you look at the fact that we went from February of 2009, the Colgan Air crash in Buffalo, where 50 lives were lost, to the D.C. crash that we had last month,
right?
You've gone nearly 16 years without a major commercial accident where you've had a significant loss of life. And as a result, you kind of get used to just, okay, it's just business as usual type of thing. And when an accident happens, it catches everybody off guard. And we had two, the one in D.C. and then the Alaska plane crash that killed 10 lives. And then right on the heels of that, you had this dramatic footage of the flight in Toronto that ended up on its roof, but no fatalities there. And then you start seeing general aviation incidents where, these two smaller planes collide, and you had a near miss in Chicago. And I'm getting emails from people saying, oh my gosh, Jay, planes are falling out of the sky. Every bird strike's reported, every near miss. You had an employee that got hit by a truck on the ramp in Chicago, Detroit, wherever it was at. That makes trending news. So anything aviation right now is front and center because it's on the minds of a lot of people. And when you have individuals that are anxious to fly, that kind of adds to it. And I never want to minimize what people go through, but I also don't want a situation to get out of hand where we think that something's worse than what it is. Yes, we had two crashes from a commercial standpoint that were, just horrific. And then, of course, you had the general aviation crash in Philadelphia that was caught on video that was horrific as well. And you just have all of those happen in such a short span of time. And the thought is, oh, my gosh, yeah. And I was on so many shows, especially national shows, where people were saying that I was talking to or against. And they said, well, Jay, these things didn't happen under Biden. It's happening now under Trump, as though in the 3.5 weeks at that point in time he'd been in office, it was all his fault. And my point was, not only is it not his fault, I take exception with all the people in Washington, D.C. on both sides of the aisle that could have been working the last 4, 8, 12 years to make the aviation world through the FAA stronger, and you chose not to do it. And we have a shortage of air traffic controllers. We have technology based on World War II technology from 50, 60 years ago. The FAA gets whatever money falls off the table, never a priority. And now you're going to blame Trump for things when you could have, in your position, really made a change, but you opted not to. And that type of position I just have zero patience for, because those men and women could have done things in D.C. and chose not to.
So what's the odds that we privatize our FAA like Canada did?
It's possible. And I think if it's going to happen, it would be under President Trump. It's going to take a Manhattan project kind of a priority to pull it off in a few years. But, when you look at somebody like Musk and his team from SpaceX walking in to see what the FAA is using, I just don't have an analogy, because you can't use the term upgrade the FAA facilities, because that would be an insult to the word upgrade. They are so far past where they should be. It's laughable / tragic about how outdated so many of these systems are. But the point is, these men and women, understaffed as they are, have still found a way to pull it off day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. They have done an incredible job. And can you imagine if we got them state-of-the-art equipment at their disposal when they're doing the job of 1, 2, or 3 people, how much safer the industry will become as a result here in the United States?
Well, Jay, I have a feeling this is one of those jobs that's on the cusp of being replaced by AI, and rightfully so. And, you know, maybe we don't need to go from like an Atari 2600 to a PlayStation. Maybe we need to go to robots.
Well, there's going to be AI involved. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But the problem is, and this was clearly illustrated in the near miss that we had in Chicago, where it was clearly pilot error based on the part of the Challenger jet that was, or the Learjet that was, you know,
not listening to the air traffic controller. All right.
And he was having a hard time from the get-go, so you could kind of see that was coming. But human error is going to be a part of everything that we do. And the question is, how much of AI is going to allow us to compensate for the human error side of things? Because most near misses, crashes, or accidents, a component of those tend to be human error. So you can do all you can, but humanly speaking, there's only so much we can do to minimize / reduce or eliminate that. So the idea is let's do as much as we can to minimize all of that as much as we humanly possible can.
Jay Ratliff, I think the most important fact you brought to the table today, this was the most safe January and February in U.S. aviation in 20 years.
Yep, and you can go to the NTSB dashboard to look at that as far as the number of accidents that's there. And again, I'm not minimizing anybody's concern, but again, I will quickly point out, you know, people say flying is safer than driving. I statistically can prove in time flying safer than walking down the street. So, yeah, from an injury standpoint.
Absolutely.
So,
all right.
No hesitation for me getting on an airplane.
All right, this is Jay Ratliff. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Coming up next, well, there's been a lot of concern for people who are getting laid off lately, and a lot of people getting laid off not just in D.C., but elsewhere in the federal government sphere. But really, even though they've been getting all the attention, layoffs are something most of us have to deal with at some point in time. There's a lot of people listening right now that are dealing with either being laid off or the specter of being laid off. Heck, that's almost bad as losing your job, is just sitting around worrying about it all day. Scott Allen Curley's back on the James Show to talk about how this could really put people in the dumps. I have there's a friend of mine who his company's in the middle of a buyout offer, and if the deal falls through, they all lose their job, and he just has to go to work every day with that sword hanging over his head.
That's are we talking now? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Scott. Yeah, we're on there.
Okay, I'm sorry. How are you today?
Doing great. Welcome to the show. So
thank you so much.
So what talk about what people go through when either they get laid off or they have to worry about layoffs excessively.
Well, one thing they go through, and again, thank you for having me, is stress and anxiety is obviously the most obvious thing that folks go through. And so many times it's kind of unfortunate to say and acknowledge that we have, many employees have a false sense of security when it comes to, you know, their job and their job situation. You know, there really is no true security in any job. The only security that any of us can find is in ourselves. And that's how we need to be thinking to alleviate some of the stress, in my opinion.
Well, I've always been under the impression, and this is so much easier said than done, that stress and worrying, for the most part, is voluntary. You have to actively decide to worry about things.
Man, it's funny that you say that. You just stole my thunder. Because what I was just going to share is that there are really only two things that we can control in the world. And that's our that's our own attitude and our own behavior. There's really nothing else outside of us that we can truly control. We may be able to influence things sometimes, but we can't control them. So if we really understand and acknowledge and receive and accept that fact that no matter what happens, the only thing we can really control is our own attitude and behavior, then let's focus on what we can control.
Well, let's start taking hold of things we can control. I think one thing that would kind of lighten the load when you're worried about getting laid off is if you have some money in the bank, if you have an emergency fund, if you know that if you get laid off, you'll have, 3-6 months of cushion for you to find the next thing. I think that's huge.
It is huge. No question about it. I think what may rival that in terms of importance is how much we believe in ourselves. Because at the end of the day, that's what we have to count on. That money's going to run out eventually, no matter what. But if we have a belief in ourselves and we don't take a victim stance, and if things start happening, and if we lose a job, then what I suggest and encourage everyone to do is just apply the law of numbers. And this is what I mean by that: 100% of opportunities will not be denied you 100% of the time. It's guaranteed. It's mathematically impossible.
Well, that's a silver lining saying there. I've always said the real antidote to being laid off, like if you never want to be laid off again, if you never want to be fired again, also you can set your own, vacation time or maternity leave or whatever, is if you're self-employed. That's really the big one, to where you have other problems, but being laid off is not one of them.
That's true, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I own several businesses, and that's just kind of what I do. And you're right. I wouldn't trade it for the world, because at the end of the day, it takes a special kind of person to really jump out there and take that leap. But I will tell you, to not be long-winded, that I would rather count on myself and bank on myself as opposed to counting on someone else to take charge of my future. That's, if things are going to go upside down, I want it to go upside down because of something I did, not because of something that someone else did.
So you got a podcast starting up? You got a show, Scott Allen Curley Show?
I do. Thank you for mentioning it. The show was created. I don't know how much you know about my past, but drug addiction. I was in prison for 10 years. I was homeless. Went from that to kind of changing my mindset. And now I'm the CEO of several companies, one of which is the fourth largest tax resolutions firm in the country, which is called Finish Line Tax Solutions. I wrote a book about about my journey. And I started this podcast to try to put the spotlight on other, what I call heroes next door. We're just inundated with so much negativity and nonsense, in my opinion, that I really think it's important for us to really recognize that there are heroes right within our community, right next door, that are doing amazing things, that have overcome tremendous odds. And I think they need to be recognized. And also, I think that recognition could bring about some inspiration for us.
Well, I love those comeback stories, going from prison to self-made millionaire. Sounds like good stuff. The Scott Allen Curley Show launches March 19th. Look for it online. ScottAllenCurley.com as well. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
My next guest, Renata Castro from USA for All. She's with an immigration firm, and we like to bring her on to talk about what's going on with the border. So we've had a bunch of DOGE cuts. We've had a bunch of aid be suspended. We've had a bunch of executive orders. What has changed in your world? Let's start with for our legal immigrants. Anything our legal immigrants have to be aware of in the last couple months?
Yes. At this time, there has been a major shift in the way this current administration is handling cases of those who are seeking lawful ways to remain in the United States, particularly as it involves cases of those who married U.S. citizens. And during the Biden administration, several cases being called into interviews. And this is particularly relevant at a time where the government is reducing its workforce. So with the reinstating of the requirement of an interview in a case like that, it is expected that many individuals seeking and eligible for a lawful way to remain in the United States will see their cases take a lot longer to be concluded. And that has become a reality already throughout the United States, as immigration attorneys are being flooded with interview requests for their clients in cases where a few months ago they were being processed administratively and at a lesser cost for these individuals.
Are you talking about people who are applying for asylum? Or is this a wider umbrella than that?
My expectation is that it will impact more people. The government has taken a much tougher stance. Deport first, ask questions second. And unfortunately, when the position shifts in such a dramatic way, you will see individuals that are eligible for immigration relief, but that are just going to fall into this vortex of removal and of negative decisions. This happened in the first Trump administration, so this doesn't come as a surprise. I think that this time around, Trump was just a lot more prepared to implement strategies that would negatively impact individuals seeking to come into the United States. We just didn't expect them to happen so fast.
All right. What about for illegal immigrants? What has changed for them?
I think undocumented aliens remain apprehensive. There's a big fear over the impending requirement to register with the federal government. I actually have seen a movement of American employers who are apprehensive for their loss of individuals who work for them and who don't have status. The number of American employers who are reaching out to immigration attorneys is the highest we've seen in a long time. And at the same time, we want to say, you know, you're violating the law. You should have expected it. You can't help but feel empathy for those who rely on the work of individuals, especially for positions that no one wants to fill. And at this time, there's not much that we can do in the short term. So I wouldn't be surprised if we started seeing higher prices in historically filled positions historically filled by immigrants in the service industry, such as landscaping, construction, hospitality, and whatnot.
Yeah, a close family friend is a general contractor, and he lost his whole framing crew last month. Yep. It was the darndest thing. I mean, we didn't go through and run their social security numbers to the tightest, background check possible. But, some people are starting to feel it already. Renata Castro, if someone needs help, how do they find you?
They go online to usaforall.com.
And that's the numeral 4, usaforall.com. Thank you, Renata.
Thanks for having me.